Hill interviewing Dennis Grove on February 18th, 2006 for the Muncie Labor Oral History Project. Dennis, I want to begin by thanking you for agreeing to help me with my study. I've been beginning these interviews with each of the participants in the study by asking them to tell me a little bit about how you or your family got to Muncie, Indiana when you came here.
Well, I've been here my whole life.
Okay.
My dad was a General Motors worker.
Oh, okay.
Stepfather who raised me.
Yeah.
He, which was called Chevrolet back then.
Right.
He worked there till he retired. And we've always been in Muncie. My dad was he was kind of a tough guy, but he told every one of us, there's 5 of us kids, he said, you go to work, you do your job, you give them the best you got, I'll take care of you the rest of your life. That's changed.
Yeah,
That's changed.
Yeah,
but,
we'll talk a bit about that.
Yeah.
How long did he was a career guy at Chevrolet?
Yes. Yeah, he retired early because of health issues, but he worked there.
What was his job there?
He was an inspector in the Forge department. That's all I know. I don't know. I was never there. And I don't know if I've ever been, I think maybe in the place one time, but knew not much about it.
But he was there in what I've come to call in this study the glory days of
Absolutely.
Muncie Chevrolet, when they were employing a few thousand people.
Right, because he was there in the 40s and after he got out of the service, and in the 50s and on. I think he left, probably in the 70s, something like that.
Just out of curiosity, what did his father do?
I am not sure.
Oh, okay.
He was deceased long before I was ever around. I have no idea.
But your father was in Muncie.
It was my stepfather who raised me.
Stepfather,
yes.
But he was in Muncie. He came here. His family was in Muncie.
Yeah, I'm sure that I don't know any other roots other than Muncie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about your educational background.
Well, I graduated from Southside High School. I waited a year or so and tried Ball State. At the time, I was working full time in the factory at midnights, and I went.
Which factory?
Westinghouse.
Oh, really?
See, you had to be 18 to work there. I graduated from high school in 1965. I was 17.
Okay.
And I wasn't 18 yet, so I turned 18 in July, and I started working there in September, and I grew up there. Grew up there, literally. And after about a year out of high school, I tried college for a while, and I just got trying to work full time and go to school full time. That was back in the Vietnam era. You had to carry so many hours.
Yeah.
And I could go to sleep 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, anytime. So I gave it up, and virtually didn't do a thing. And then when ABB, which went out Westinghouse, closed back in about '98. Because our work went out of the country, we were eligible for education benefits, and I discovered one day, just doing some job search, that I was computer illiterate. So I went back. I took got a technical certificate in computer information services at Ivy Tech. Went to school for a year.
And you got paid? Was paid for?
Got paid for, and then got paid the same as unemployment while we were going. And I had the luxury that I didn't have years ago of just being a full-time, nothing but student.
Right.
Ended up graduating with 3.875. So, that's just, and that's really it.
We'll go back to the point where you decide as a high school graduate you're going to go work at Westinghouse. I mean, why did you do that?
Back then, and I've told this to many people, and my kids don't understand it today because of the economic situation, you could pick any place in this town to work in a factory. At the time, there was Delco, there was Chevrolet, there was Warner Gear, and there was this new place that just opened called Westinghouse.
Okay.
And you could virtually go to work. All of them were hiring all the time. And my theory was, well, this place is brand new. These people all deal in auto parts. This is kind of something different. This is electricity. That's something the world's always going to need. It looks like it might be a good, secure place to go, so that's where I went.
Okay. So you actually went in there when the plant was a brand spanking new facility?
It opened in '61. I started there in '65.
Okay.
So
what did you do there?
At first, I've done many things there.
Okay.
At first, it was probably the only job in the whole place that even resembled an assembly line. It was gluing insulation blocks on insulation washers that went into transformers.
Okay.
Westinghouse made large power transformers.
Right.
But after that, I did lots of different things. Most of my time was in the shipping department.
Okay.
And Westinghouse, which later ABB, was not like what people think of a factory. There were no assembly lines. It was clean. It was, you worked with partners or groups. You did something different almost every day. It was far from monotonous. It got repetitive, of course.
Yeah.
But virtually, you took a job, and they would, whatever area you were in, it had to be assembled from this point to this point, and you did it in different steps, and each one was different. Every transformer made was custom made, so there were very few alike. You know, a lot of blueprints, a lot of, and I still today believe, and they had a pretty good screening process when they hired. You know, some of the things hung on factory workers, you know, the dumb hillbillies that work in the factory. The intelligence of the workers there, I think, were very above average. I worked with some very intelligent people, a lot of college graduate, educated people, but just good. Really, the people that were just not real smart they didn't get a job there.
How many people were working there in what I call the really boom times of Westinghouse?
About 1,200, I think.
Okay.
The boom times.
And these are 3 shifts?
Yes, always. Yeah.
Did you change from shift to shift, or you always pretty much on the same one?
Never voluntarily.
Okay.
I worked midnights the first couple of years, and basically I was a day shifter for many, many years.
Okay.
Then as leaner years came, I worked a lot of seconds and midnight. I worked at all shifts.
Just to play this out, because I got to do this at some point in our interview anyway. When is the transition from Westinghouse to ABB?
Well, you know, Westinghouse bought out GE technology at one time. The transformer market was getting leaner. Utilities were cutting back, and it's hard to believe when you look at your electric bill. But we've had utility companies come in and speak to the union, and before you left, you felt like giving them a donation. They were so bad. Yeah. But ABB was a merger of ASEA from Sweden, and Brown Boveri from Germany.
Do you know how to spell ASEA?
I think it was ACE. I have to look it up. It might be on the internet somewhere. Okay. But and Brown Boveri of Germany. Okay. They merged and then incorporated into Switzerland, their headquarters. Okay. And they bought out all the Westinghouse plants. Now there was a concern with the government that because of Westinghouse buying out GE and ABB buying out Westinghouse, a monopoly or something, and there were some hearings and everything that had to be, and ABB had to agree that they would keep their operations here at least 7 years. Okay. And lo and behold, almost 7 years to the days when they closed.
When you were there and the transition was from an American company, Westinghouse, to a foreign company, this consolidation, if you will, that became ABB, was there any change at all in what you and the other workers there did?
No, not really, except we went to, there was a line that we had done a little bit and didn't do much that they brought back. It's kind of technical. There are 2 types of transformers, shell and core form. Okay. The core form they dabbled with in the 70s and decided they didn't want to get in it. ABB was heavily in it, so they brought that line back. There was a lot of management didn't change. Human resource didn't change. We negotiated to keep our same contract. And a lot of PR on their part. Right. They took people to random drawings, took people to Germany to see other factories. They gave everybody jackets and hats, and it was just a big PR thing.
Big team spirit deal?
Yes, but very little changed.
Okay. When did you first get involved with union activities?
You know, I was thinking yesterday, I knew you were coming. I'm terrible with dates, absolutely terrible. But I remember in 1970, I started at 65, I became a section steward. I remember that for some reason.
Okay.
That's the first time I was involved. And when I got involved then, I was involved constantly.
Well, let me go back to the beginning of that, because I've asked all these people the same question. Why did you do that? Why did you want to get involved in union leadership?
Well, back in the old days, it was us against them.
Okay.
And I felt like
it really was the attitude.
It was.
Okay.
And I felt that I had the intelligence and the gift of gab or whatever to be a good representative.
Okay.
So that's why I wanted to do it.
Okay. So you started out as a steward.
Right.
And then got involved in various other kind of activities.
Yes, steward, and then eventually what's called a divisional steward, which is steward over everybody on one shift.
Okay.
Then later became a treasurer and secretary of steward's count, different ones, things.
So you did a variety of different kinds of work. I guess I put it that way for the union, as far as really understanding how the union worked out there.
Yes. Yeah. Really.
Tell me some about how the union operated. I mean, you mentioned that there's this pretty well-known figure, J.D. Lewis, who was the head of the union for a long time. I mean, I want you to talk a little bit about how the union operated in the sense of, you said us versus them. I didn't say that. But
No, that was the attitude back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
In terms of the relationship of the union in what, I don't want to put words in your mouth, it seems to me as kind of an adversarial relationship with management. I mean, how'd that kind of play out on a year-to-year basis when you're working?
I use the analogy, this is the right word, many times. Many of my confrontations, it reminded me of Leo DeRocher and an umpire, because you get nose to nose screaming with each other even.
Okay.
And that happened a lot.
It did.
It happened a lot.
Yeah.
And it was highly publicized in the early years that Westinghouse Workers, which was IUE.
Yeah, I should have asked you that. What local is this and what's the union?
It was called International Union Electrical and Radio Workers.
Radio.
IUE, Local 917.
Okay.
And we were notorious over town for our Wildcat walkouts.
Oh, okay.
And quite honestly, I started in '65, and we had quite a few, but it was the early years from '61 to '65 when they used to have them almost on a weekly basis.
Oh.
The most famous story is a guy brought a trumpet in one day, and he was showing everybody, and the supervisor told him this wasn't the place to have a trumpet, so he jumped up on a tall thing and played a song, and it told him to get down, and they sent him home, and everybody left. And they say you blow a trumpet at Westinghouse, and everybody leaves. And it used to be, I can remember things. I worked in the shipping department, and we had virtually no heat. Especially on midnight, it was cold.
Yeah.
And we said, we need something. And they bring these salamanders in that the fumes would make your eyes water. And the office was heated. And there was times that we just, as a group, march in and sit down and say, what are you doing? I said, we're going to stay in here because it's warm. And it's just to get back to work and we don't go home. It took years, but they insulated, got better heat, and it changed. But just little things like that.
So in terms of the unions in town, I mean, I've had people say they had a lot of wildcats in places like Broderick's and a fair number of places like Gear, but you think Westinghouse was probably known for
it was the king in the early years, absolutely. The king of wildcats, yes.
Yeah. Well, what about bigger strikes? I mean, were there times when you worked there when they had some really serious
1976, 1979 were the two big strikes.
Okay, issues were?
Wages, of course, as usual. 76 was 5.5 months. It was a long strike, and it was probably, if there is such a thing as a good strike, the best thing that ever happened to the union in there.
Okay.
Because the end result of the 76 strike of 5.5 months was, our contention was that we weren't paid a wage comparable to our neighbors.
Oh, okay.
We said we have to buy things in the same store.
Yeah, right.
They're making more than we are. And they kept saying, no, you're not. You're not. Of course, the company was always a wage considered fringe benefits and everything else in mind. So what we settled for to end that strike was called an area wage survey. And it was set up very, very well, very systematically, where they took surveys of different factories in the area, compared the wage, tried to compare that work to work, and that settled the strike. And in trying to remember, 2 years, our wages doubled. A lot of management people lost their job
Yeah.
that agreed to that.
But did that wage scale then make you comparable to what people were making in the UAW unions
Yes,
around here?
it did.
Okay. And that's what you were after?
We were way below before that.
Oh, okay.
And I'll never forget the day they revealed the results. It was just a big, some of management had not even seen it yet. And an outside company did it. They hired a different firm.
Right.
And so when the firm presented it, the union said here, the company said on the other side of the room. They presented the figure, and you look over to the company side, and their jaws dropped. And you could just see them slumping in their seats, and soon after, a lot of them didn't work there anymore because they agreed to it.
When was the next big strike? Was in the late 70s?
79,
Yeah.
we had a strike. And quite honestly, the issues weren't, there wasn't a particular issue. Once again, it was just general. And I think basically we went back with a little raise and a few improvements, but
Yeah.
nothing real serious. It wasn't that long.
Okay.
The 76 was a big one. Now they had a big one in 63 before I was there.
Yeah.
And that was just more or less getting established, I think, more
Yeah.
than anything.
Okay. You've kind of alluded to this, but this is a specific question, so we can put it in this context. During your entire work career there, and maybe it changed over time, how would you describe the relationship between management and labor? And I'm really after whether it changed as it began to be a different scenario out there.
It changed.
Okay.
It had to change because the world changed, you know. In fact, it's something I was thinking last night. The plant closed, I think, in 98. I wasn't involved probably the last 3 or 4 years because I committed political suicide as far as unions went. It was this contract, I can't tell the exact year, I'm thinking 93, 94. Work was getting lean, very lean. And one thing our union always had and coveted was the territorial part of our jobs.
Right.
You work here, I work over here, you don't come over here, I don't go over there.
Okay.
Well, we could see in a plant where half of the plant had no work, the other half of the plant was busy, but because of our territorial boundaries, couldn't do anything about it, you know. And you could also see profits dropping. And I'm a union person, but I'm also, if I may back up,
Sure.
something, and I thought a lot about this since you were coming over. Without a fault, almost every union leader that I ever worked with in that plant, and whether it means anything, were all excellent workers. Worked hard every day, did their job the best they could. And I was proud of that myself, you know. But as a realist, you could see it wasn't working. I mean, it just, so probably with the last contract we had, the big push from the company was, we've got to have a mobile workforce. We've got to have an avenue to move people where the work is. And it made sense to me as a person, if you could take someone that's not busy, put them where they are busy, get the product at the door, and get more in, make more profit.
Sure.
Really, the life, your life will be better, you know. And I was in charge of local negotiations, and I told our coworkers, I said, we're going to have to think about this, and no, nobody wanted anything to do with it. So finally, through negotiations, we got the company to agree that due to the mobile workforce, no one would ever be laid off because of that, and that they would even open their books for an auditor to look.
Right.
And with those guarantees, I convinced our negotiating committee to agree to it. And it passed narrowly. And after that, there were areas of the plant that, I mean, if I walked in the area, they were all over me.
Yeah. But basically, as you look back now, from the wonderful vantage point of hindsight, you were trying to save some of these jobs.
I thought so, and I still do today, even though the place closed.
Yeah.
I think it was a master plan when they bought it, that they were going to close it no matter what.
Oh, okay.
There was a 7-year commitment they had to stay, and they almost to the day they left. And
When you made the transition from Westinghouse to ABB, was it pretty apparent to you as a person involved in leadership in the union that this was starting to go in a different direction than it did in the great days of full employment with Westinghouse?
I don't know necessarily it was because of the change of ownership. It was just the change of the business in general.
Okay.
You could see it. It was just not there like it used to be.
Yeah.
It was in the glory days of the 60s. I worked in the shipping department, and their scheduling was so terrible that 3 weeks of the month we would go out picking up trash, cutting weeds, because we had nothing to do. The last week of the month, to make the shipping schedule, we worked 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it was always that way. Always that way. And then, but the work just kept coming and coming and coming. It was booming,
Did the workforce gradually go down, or is there some point where it really gets chopped and it goes from, you mentioned 1,200 people at full employment, to a point where when it closes, how many people do you have out there?
Well, when it started closing, I think there was about 300.
Oh, gosh, okay.
And then it just went, and as areas finished their work, then people left.
Okay.
And then I was laid off in 1984 for 2.5 years. That's when I got really lean. And then I went back in 87, and ABB bought the place in 90 and really picked up. They started hiring people.
Right.
I don't know if you remember, they took applications at the field house,
Yeah.
and there were 6,000 people in line for a job.
Yeah.
And in fact, it makes me think, part of the negotiations to get us back was a scaled hourly rate.
Okay.
We came back at a lesser rate than the people who were there. Then in increments, we went back up. And anybody hired went in at a lower rate, and then eventually their wages went up.
When you mentioned the comparability of what you eventually negotiated for with the UAW wage scale in town, which to me has always been kind of the high mark of wage scales and fringe benefits in Muncie among labor groups. When you got that, did you have the same kind of really great fringe benefits those guys had?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
So you mean your health care was as good as those guys, which is pretty great health care, I might add.
Yes, it was good. I don't know if it was quite as good, but it was good.
Because those guys are basically not paying anything for health care.
Yeah, we paid a little, and as time went on, we paid more and more like everybody else did.
Yeah.
Back in the early years, there was a gentleman that was in charge of benefits that he was just a diehard, I don't know, he was an asshole. And if you had things coming, he would tell you he didn't.
Right.
Just to see, hoping you wouldn't challenge it. And he was notorious for that. And that changed with times but this guy, you had a benefit coming, or I remember I took off, had my tonsils out. I was very young, I was 20.
Yeah.
I took vacation, not knowing I could have sick leave, because he told me, no, you just have to take vacation. And I found out I could have taken sick leave, but he told me a lie just to keep me from using it, That happened back then.
As you look back on this, I mean, a really kind of gloried period in American labor history, but what do you think unions have done for workers?
It's funny. When I was at Ivy Tech, I had an English composition class, and I wrote a paper. I wish I still had it, about how unions have benefited everybody, not necessarily union workers.
Okay, I want to talk about that.
I think unions have set safety precedents and things like overtime pay, and after so many hours, that demand that most anti-union people enjoy those benefits today because the unions are the ones that fought for them. I'm sure you know much more than me, but unions originally were basically, because of the conditions in sweatshops and things like that. Sure. That's what really started.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And in safety and other things, many people's jobs today are much safer before what the unions did, I think. And I, hypocritically, here I am, I'm in management right now, my job. But I think maybe because of my union background, I might give people a benefit of the doubt a little more. I look at different things. And I'm getting clear off the subject, but
No, it's okay.
for 4 years after I retired, I went to school for a year. I went to work at, I won't mention names, a local medical lab here in town, as a courier.
Yeah.
For 4 years, I drove around picking up blood samples and
Yeah.
things. And I been there about 4 years. On Wednesday, they came down and told me that I had been nominated for Employee of the Year. On Friday, they fired me.
What? That really happened?
Yes. For revealing confidential information,
Oh, jeez.
which to them was telling a coworker how much you made an hour, because everybody was on merit.
Oh, God.
And you get to looking, and they had 27 terminal in their rules of conduct. And the place, I saw it while I worked there and didn't realize it. They fire probably 75% of the people that they hire. And they're so proud of it.
Jeez.
And they get this form letter they send you, hoping this will be a learning experience. And once I got into management, I ran into some other people
Yeah.
in the management side of their business, and said, how things going? I said, fine. I said, how you like being in management? I said, I like it great. I said, and I said, in fact, I learned a lot from you people. And he said, what's that? I said, how not to treat your workers.
What do you think, you talked about the advantages of unions. What do you think are some of the disadvantages of unions?
Sometime in my job as a union official, I fought for people's jobs that were just, quite honestly, worthless bastards. Had no business being there. They drug down their coworkers and the company, and they used the union. Here I am, save my job. And I've done it before. I've used some opposite tactics too. I had a good friend, very good friend, that had a very serious drinking problem. He lost his family. He spent almost all his money, and he got where he drank so much he forget to come to work. One of my fellow union people said, they're going to fire him. We got to get in there. We got to get in there and save his job. I sit down at the table and they said, what do you want us to do? I said, fire him. And he said, what do you mean? I said, he needs woke up. And they fired him and they rehired him later. He turned out to be he gets clean, sober, and a great employee. But I said, we're not going to do him a favor by getting him back in here. And he needs something to wake him up. And it did it. It worked. But, which is unheard of a union person, but that was just the way I thought.
You think that unions in certain situations might tend to be overly protective of people that weren't too productive?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So there's a price you pay for solidarity.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Yeah. There is a price to pay. I never felt good about it. You would brag, and you wear it as a badge of honor. I got so-and-so's job back for him, but personally, that's why I didn't have to do that.
But you do feel, based on this long career as a union guy, that the advantages certainly outweigh the disadvantages.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
When I worked at that pathologist, there was a guy that knew my union background, and he's the biggest Republican. In fact, he had George Bush's picture hanging in his locker. But he came to me one day, he said, Dennis, he said, would you try to get a union organized here? He said, I think we need it. I said, from you? He said, yeah. He says, I think we need one, and I think you're the person to do it.
Yeah.
And I said,
that would have been a real feat.
Yeah.
Interviewing what I call the George Brown of Empire.
Yeah, it is. And nothing against Dr. Brandon, he was a good man personally.
Yeah, I've known George a long time. He's a good guy.
Personally, he's a fine gentleman.
Yeah.
It was just a business. Yeah.
What role, if any, did race play in union activities at Westinghouse?
Well, I believe unions are one of the great organizations that probably have helped the racial issue. Equality was which is that. When we are a union brother,
Yeah.
you're a brother, black, white, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think unions as a whole is a very non-prejudiced organization.
Okay.
And I think as far as civil rights, probably a leader, you know.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But in the 60s, when you went in there, and I've asked this about a whole bunch of other union locals in Muncie, was it pretty easy for African Americans to get jobs out there?
Yeah, it was. And in the 60s, you know, the attitude of everybody was different as far as race.
Right.
We had some radicals. It's funny you should say that. I worked with a lady, and her husband worked with the same organization I work now. He happened to have some medical problems and lost a leg. He's not there anymore. But I worked with him in '65, and he was that close to a Black Panther. You know, he's not even the same man today. He's changed. But we had. I remember having Walter, get it go or stop. Yeah, we had some things, racial slurs, and when people would get disciplined, and basically they were on their own because you know you just couldn't represent a guy because he was racial.
Right.
He sees shadows.
Oh, that's okay. What about the role of women in unions? One of the things that's been difficult for me is to try to find women who played a leadership role because for a long time in all the unions in Muncie they simply didn't.
Until we started hiring people in 1987, you know, when I told you they started hiring people again,
Right.
there was one lady in our union, and they had a job called office clerk, and it was a few women in that job, and this particular woman, they eliminated the job and came out into the plant, and she was the only female union member probably for many, 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 many years. We did have a lady recording secretary in the late 80s, but not really involved, you know, very much.
So in fairness, it's accurate to say that as far as the Westinghouse workforce, it was pretty much a male workforce.
Oh, very much, yes.
Okay.
Very much so. Now, they hired a few women in the 70s, and they all got laid off. Then they hired a few more in the 80s, and they were the first to go as you know, business declined, of course. So basically, when the place closed, there was still this one lady that was there.
I want to go back to the point about businesses declining, because that's pretty much the story of all of these large plants in Muncie. You're working there. I mean, how do you find out about this? I mean, I've got a job here. I've been here a long time. I've been here when it's been full employment. It's starting to go south. How do you, as a guy who's a worker there, really begin to detect that?
You know, it's funny because we would always have yearly meetings with what we did last year, what we did this year. Okay. And I never, ever, ever heard them say we made $1. We lost money, always. Okay. And it got to be like the boy who cried wolf after a while, you know. We've been here 30 years, we've never made a penny. I guess, you know, if we lose more next year, we'll just, you know, what the heck. Yeah. But well, I think you see it is when you see the workforce decline. That's when you really see it. That's a true indicator.
And the work isn't there.
Yeah, and like I told you, they even went in and brought some executives from AEP in was to talk to us. Yeah. And guys, you felt sorry for them when they left. The utility companies, what was our demise was that they were basically broke. And they were patching up old transformers to keep them running rather than buy new ones. Yeah. Now, we knew, and I'm sure ABB knew, that the day was going to come that they couldn't patch them anymore. And by getting into the business, they moved our work to Spain and Canada.
Oh, okay.
The day's going to come they have to. Yeah. And they're going to make money. In fact, we probably have, I would guess 50 people that since the day left still work for ABB doing installations and repairs. And they're busy as can be. They're travel. I did some of it when I was there.
Yeah, right.
Traveled around the country, doing installations, repair, technical advice, and that was part of what I did the last few years. And they're just they're making tons of money.
Is there anything in that plant right now?
Brooks, Brooks Tomato Place is at least about half of it.
Oh, okay.
And I think they have used it for a warehouse.
And so when you see cars out there, it has nothing to do with ABB.
No, they still, I think because they actually own the building,
Yeah.
their oil treatment trailers they use for installations and stuff, I think they're parked there sometimes.
Okay.
And I think they even have some training there every once in a while for the field
I mean,
people.
there actually is such a thing in Muncie right now as an ABB employee.
People that live in Muncie, but actually I think they work out of St. Louis.
Oh, really?
Because the St. Louis plant, which is getting ready to close, I understand,
Oh, okay.
is the, I think, the only ABB plant in the United States right now. But they basically work, get a phone call, you know, it's through phone call. The field service supervision is in St. Louis. But basically, you know, you just know that you're going to California to do this, and you know, and you, whatever way, fax or whatever, you get your information, and you.
Okay.
But I think occasionally you have to go to St. Louis, and I think they even had a training. I know they had a training session here once.
What did, I should have asked you this a long time ago. What does ABB stand for? What is that? What is ABB?
That's ASEA Brown Bavaria.
ASEA?
Brown Bavaria. It was the company ASEA,
Okay.
and the company Brown Bavaria.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it made, yeah.
When I first came to Muncie to join the Ball State history faculty in the late 60s, I ran into a guy, I was living in Michigan, who'd been in Muncie for a while as a CPA. He said, oh, no, I don't know, Warren. I don't know if you want to go to Muncie, Indiana. That's really a tough union town. You think that was an accurate description of Muncie in the late 1960s?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Why?
sure was. Well, because of the number of union people more than anything.
Okay.
Yeah. Of course, with numbers you have power.
Okay.
And there are more union people in Muncie than, you know,
Okay.
you have political clout, you have, you know, economic clout, as well, yeah.
Well, I think what he was really getting at, and I picked up in this study, is it was a time in Muncie's labor history where these big unions would hang together, and to be blunt, they didn't take any crap from management.
No. It was a worker's world then. You know, the work was there, they needed the people,
Yeah, right, okay.
and you could demand more than what you could
Yeah.
today. Yeah. Adversely, we weren't part of because of a lot of Jay's feelings, you know, the unity of the whole town, and we were just kind of
Yeah.
our own little.
Is that just really him, by contrast
Pretty much.
with other union presidents?
Is really him, but because he was in charge for so long, it just became a general attitude.
Oh, okay.
That's just like the United Way campaigns.
Yeah.
His attitude, he was a man that a lot of people admired, and his thinking became their thinking, you know. United Way, that's a company program. We don't want anything to do with it. That's another one of my political suicides. I was involved with the Boys Club and a few things,
Oh, okay.
and I broke ranks, and I was asked if I'd be one of the ambassadors to help with the campaign. I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I was a union official, and then later I was on the board of directors of United Way.
Yeah.
Went to some union counseling classes at back where Al used to run.
Yeah.
And still how I became familiar with Tiny. Tiny and I served on the board at the same time.
Yeah.
And still think it's probably one of the finest organizations in this town.
But Westinghouse was then kind of an outlier
Yes.
as far as unions in Muncie.
Yeah. And then there was a time there where we had two different presidents, a guy named Jim Jones and Gene Moore, that didn't think that way. You know, I mentioned to you that ABB, when they came, they took people to Germany. They gave everybody a jacket, everybody hats. And Jay got defeated, and he wasn't president, and I was still a union official. And I brought it up in one of our union meetings. I said, you know, everybody in this place has an ABB shirt, ABB hat. I said, no one has an IUE hat or a shirt. Why not? So because I spoke up, I got elected. I was the shirt and hat guy. I went to a little place down here called Dark Star.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
We designed a shirt, and I bet in 2 or 3 years we had sold thousands of them. I'd buy them in such bulk, we could sell them for $3 or $4, and every month or so we'd have a different color, and we'd set it up in the cafeteria at lunch, and everybody had a union jacket, a shirt, and And people, for the first time ever, saw IUE, Union Apparel, in the community. They'd never seen it before.
And you sure see a lot of UAW stuff.
Yeah, you do. And the IUE stuff, just probably because of age, they've all got moth-ridden. They're gone now. But my wife still got a few that she wears in the house, old IUE T-shirts. But I bet I bought thousands of them. We had jackets, we had hats. I still got an IUE jacket I wear out when I paint. It's got paint all over it right now.
So it was a means of identification. And,
right.
And,
look at us, here we are.
Camaraderie.
And another thing, when Jay wasn't president, we had people go to district meetings that never went. I personally went to the Solidarity March in Washington.
Oh.
Back when Reagan filed the PETCO workers.
Air controllers.
Another friend, still a friend of mine now, he and I went with a gentleman from the district office. We went to the march, which was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to see some unity, well, it's called Solidarity.
Yeah.
There was hundreds of thousands of people there.
Right. Well, those are all the formal questions I have, but at the end of my interviews in this project, I give my interviewees an opportunity to sort of step back and add anything that you'd like to about your long career as a very important leader of this union at Westinghouse and later ABB. So it's your chance to add some final sort of concluding comments, if you wish.
Well, I think we pretty well covered it all. I was the typical union radical for so many years, and as times changed, things had to change, and I think maybe I changed a little more than a lot of the union people, and thus committed union political suicide. At the time the plant closed, that was the guy that, here's the guy that cost us our job right there. Blame him. There's still people probably think that. And I still today don't think I did. I think I just realized, I thought I was doing my union brothers a favor, whether they realized it or not. I don't say I'm smarter than them. And a lot of them understood it. They really did. But you still had a few that, and everything, sometimes a few are the loudest and make the most noise. And but I don't regret it. I enjoyed it. There was times that it got frustrating. There's times that it's funny, calls in the middle of the night and this and that, and they're going in. If somebody they're getting ready to fire so-and-so, get out of bed, it'll be nice, go in and try to defend them. And now I have a job now, management, so-so didn't show up, I got to get out of bed in the middle of the night and go to work. So,
but as you look back, Dennis, those were economically now, being kind of blunt about this in terms of wages and wage scales. These were really great times in the history of this community, and in many respects in the history of this country.
Yeah.
And one of the things that certainly comes through with this study, with all the people I've talked to, is they're all aware of the fact that those days are gone forever. They're
Absolutely.
Coming back.
My children and grandchildren, my children, kids, they're 39, 37, 35, and 33.
Yeah.
I can remember when they were getting in their high school years and thinking about the future, well, Dad, how do I get a job like yours? And I said, you don't. They're gone. They're dinosaurs. You don't get these kind of jobs. And it's funny. I have 2 boys, 2 girls, and the girls both work in the medical field.
Yeah, right.
But I have 2 boys. One graduated from Ball State with a degree in history and geography.
That's a pattern in this study, I might add.
Yeah, a degree in history and geography. He works at Life Touch Photos as a supervisor. I don't know what he makes, $9, maybe $10 an hour, and that's all there is. My other son went to ITT Tech, became a heating and air conditioning mechanic. Always had good paying jobs.
Sure.
The world has changed, But
well, I tell the story that when I came to Muncie in the late 60s as a not yet PhD finished assistant professor and was playing a lot of industrial league basketball, I would run into guys who would work in a Gear or a Chevy, and we'd go have a few beers, and they'd say, how much are you guys making out there as assistant professor? And those guys are making twice as much money as I was.
yeah, I started working at Westinghouse in 1965, and I think I was making $1.90 an hour. When the plant closed in '98, I was making $22 an hour, and that's not including benefits. That's just hourly wage.
How much overtime could you get in out there?
You could almost get all you wanted.
Yeah, that's a story, even with these automobile cars.
Oh, we had people that made $7,500,000 a year.
Yeah.
They had a job, a crayman job,
Yeah.
which they had later, they made it remote control and took the people out of the cab.
Yeah.
But I know guys that would work 16 hours a day every day. Unfortunately, they never slept most of the time because that's what they could if they were needed. But there were people, there was a guy, I can't even think of his name, where the auditors or somebody at the corporation says, you got a guy that has a job here called Crayman that made almost as much as the plant manager last year. What's going on? He lived there.
Yeah.
You know?
That's right. So you could do that, plus you had good fringe benefits.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you had your overtime hogs, and you had some
Is that actually a phrase people use?
overtime
hogs?
Overtime whores sometimes used. Yeah. I have my job now. I'll have vacancies. Say, well, you got your overtime hogs you call. They'll come and work for you. Yeah. But yeah, I personally I would work if I needed it for something. I would work it, but you know, I didn't do it constantly like some people did. And when you left, your package was based on what you made in your career. And the guys that worked constantly, gosh, you could see, you know, and when the place closed, they announced it was a very depressing, oh gosh. Like I said, I literally grew up there. I started as an 18-year-old kid, and I was a 51-year-old man. And I'd probably still be there today. But the depression, and gosh, and people say, God, what am I going to do? I'm too old to get a job.
Right.
And they called us in groups, little by little, and said, now, we want to explain your package to you, that you're leaving. And they laid these pieces of paper, and you start going through it, and you look at it and said, when can I go? Because the packages were tremendous. Anywhere, we got a year's pay for severance pay, plus we had the buyout, and almost everybody took a lump sum and rolled it over.
Right.
But I, personally, with both of mine together, I got about $250,000.
Yeah.
And that was average. And there were some that got $400,000.
Wow.
But when people started, then we had to get a list by seniority who could leave first. Can I go? No, get away, get your name down. And people are ready to get out, you know. And today, it's the union that negotiated the severance package, plant closure package. Management people, supervisors, they left almost in tears because they were dictated what they were going to get.
Right.
And they got a mere fraction of what we got when the place closed. And
how many guys are working there when this actually closed? How many people are you talking about?
I'd say about 300.
Oh, okay.
At the time they announced the closure, it was down to 300 or 400 people.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, it just whittled down there. I think there's still one guy working there that charged the heating and air.
Yeah, but 300 people had the opportunity to get this kind of severance buyout sort of stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And you figure the 300 times 200,000, it's a lot of money.
Yeah, sure.
And that's what it cost them to get rid of us,
Right.
basically. But as the worm turns and the business picks up, they'll make it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a profit for ABB, you know. And I know I got friends personally that work in the field now. They can work virtually any time they want, as much as they want. And one of my friends, bless his heart, he's passed away recently, but running around town in a new BMW. You know, he'd been doing field service work. And they pay. I was offered the job too, but I went to New Jersey right before the place closed to help repair an old, dirty transformer. And I crawled around there on my hands and knees for 2 days and out in the heat and the filth. And I said, I don't want to do this. It's just, you know, I don't. When they offered me job in field service, I said, yeah, I'll think about it, but I don't think so. And these guys, guy I went with, he had retired and went to work with ABB again in field service after he retired. And I asked him, I said, well, did you work very much last year? Because some of them did. Virtually, you could do as much as you want. He said, well, he says, I said, were you gone a lot last year? And he said, no, not too much unless you count the 4.5 months I was in Malaysia. I said, God, 4.5 months in Malaysia, what?
Yeah.
I'm more of a homebody. I got a mother and I got a family, I got a wife. I couldn't handle 4.5 months in Malaysia.
Yeah, but you've got a very different and interesting career now, so you sort of bounce from one thing into something that's...
yeah, it's strange. You know, I got fired, and I tried retirement for the first 6 months. You know, he had all this money. You know, we had a lake cottage, and I went up there and probably spent fortune remodeling and doing this. So, but I found out not working was very expensive. Really, it is.
Yeah, true.
It really is. Yeah. And I work in this group home now, and somebody mentioned it to me. And quite honestly, when I went for my second interview and met everybody, I said, oh, I can't do this. Yeah. There's a bunch, 8 retarded people live in a house, and some of them are physically very bad shape, mentally in very bad shape. Yeah. And I went to work there and just fell in love with them and the job. And I've been a supervisor for over a year now. And the job itself is still great. Yeah. It's dealing with staff is a real pain in the butt. We have a big turnover. And quite honestly, I'm so busy right now because I fired 2 people in the last few weeks. But again, gave them every chance in the world, you know. Our job has one thing. We care for people that can't for themselves, and you have to come to work. And you give them every break in the world to come to work, and it gets to the point you got to get somebody more dependable. And I still today, I fired, like I said, 2 people in the last 2 weeks, and it gave me a knot in my stomach. I didn't like it. I did not like it at all.
Been there, done that.
And one of them accused me of some things that were terrible after I fired her. He tried to get me in bed all this time, and I didn't go, so now you're firing me. Oh, God, wow. But she's stalking now. She's driving by it. But that's part of it, you know.
Well, thank you very much for participating in my study. I really appreciate it.
Well, I don't know what help I was. But,
a lot.
So,
thank you.
Like I said, if I were you, I would maybe, you know, if you want some more, Gene Moore would be great.
Okay, I'll do it. Thanks.